welcome. I'll give everyone a minute to join. Today we're going to be talking about food drive and the eating behavior, and Nicole, one of our amazing trainers, is going to join us, and we're going to have a little chat together. So I'm going to add her in a moment, and then we will go ahead. Nicole, I'm just making sure you've joined on the account that you want to be on. There you go, got you. All right, let me add you in. And then we will get to chatting. Hopefully that will work. Yay, hello. Welcome. You can see and hear me?
Yeah, I can see and hear you okay. You're a little choppy, but hopefully that improves.
Hopefully it'll be okay. I've got you on max volume. Just everybody who's joined us, just let us know if you can see and hear us. And yeah, Ash is behind me chewing on something to shut him up while we have a little chat. And let us know if you have any issues with the audios or visuals, anyone who is watching. And we're going to chat a little bit today, Nicole, about food drive. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much for that. And Nicole, I think you're going to be kind of leading our conversation today. So I'm going to hand over to you because you're really the drive building queen. And I'm going to give it to you. And you can tell us a little bit about what we're chatting about today.
Yeah, sure thing. So today I'm going to pick Karishma's brain about food and food drive. We're going to talk a little bit about this very important part of our lives with our dogs, is them eating, right? Yeah, that's what we'll be chatting about for the next kind of 40 minutes or so. So I have a bunch of kind of just general, topics that we're going to explore today. And the first thing that I thought would be useful is just kind of to talk about and kind of explain to our community kind of what is food drive and why it's important for us to talk about it.
Yeah, this is a really important one, and one that's really close to my heart because I fucked up massively here. So we're here to tell you all the things I did wrong. But essentially what we're talking about is an animal or a dog's desire and ability to eat, to find the food that we offer them reinforcing, meaning that it's going to teach them new behaviors, maintain and reinforce behaviors. And we're really speaking to this topic, which I think is quite common amongst our community. And I hear people say it all the time to me on this platform, which is, oh, my dog isn't food motivated. Oh, my dog just doesn't really like food. Oh, my dog's just really picky. These are things that I have said before as well. And we're really here today to chat a little bit about that conundrum. Why is that a thing? And hopefully shed some light as to why for us that's not really a barrier. We just see it as another challenge that we have to overcome. It's not like, oh, we can't train that dog anymore using food. It's like, okay, well, how do we make them want food? How do we build their ability to find food reinforcing in a variety of environments? So I think just quickly before I do dive into this, there are a few disclaimers that are useful. So number one, me and Nicole have very little education and qualifications in nutrition. So that's not really what we're going to be talking about today. We're not talking about how to create a balanced diet for your dog. And I think we both are kind of in agreement that you should definitely be checking with not necessarily just a veterinarian, like someone who is really qualified and certified in canine nutrition. So a nutritionist, over just a veterinarian, right? How we would want to go to a nutrition expert over just a general GP practitioner. If you're going to make big changes to your dog's diet, if you suspect any medical issues that might be underpinning food issues, that's really important. And then the last little disclaimer is that, everything that we say today and talk about today, it's just general information. We're not trying to give you specific advice for your dog. We're going to go over some points that we find helpful in our practices, but again, Instagram is never going to be a substitute for actually working with a professional who can get a thorough history and information on your dog and lifestyle, etc. So just those three things before we start. But we are going to be talking about, how we're going to help our dogs feel really good about food and want food as a reinforcer more in a variety of circumstances. And I've got myself a gin and tonic today, Nicole, to hang out with you. So just
oh my God, amazing.
Drinking on the job today.
I'm just drinking water, so I can't cheers you because apparently that's really bad luck. So
that's that. I'm Irish. I don't think we should do that. I'll probably get cursed or something by my ancestors.
Okay. So also one thing we were talking about is that this is like definitely very relevant with a huge bulk, kind of a big bulk of our clients who are in New York City and just dogs in urban environments in general. And do you want to touch a little bit on why this is a topic that is particularly relevant to guardians who have dogs in those environments?
Yes, 100%. You're right, because like a large majority of our community members are living in like busy urban city centers. They also tend to have dogs that maybe have behavior problems or issues with emotional sensitivities, etc., etc. And for those dogs, we tend to find a large proportion of them struggle with their food and with eating, and it's a big emotional barrier for lots of guardians because they're like, my dog won't eat when I'm outside with them, and so I can't train them. Especially, I can't train them using reinforcement-based methods. Mm-hmm. Something I hear quite a lot. I have to use punishment because the dog won't eat. Is a line that I hear quite frequently. So I think for anyone who's experienced that, you know, being in these really challenging environments, you know, if I'm in the middle of a really kind of stressful and scary place, I'm not really thinking about like a salad. You know, I'm like, fuck. So it makes sense, I think, for a lot of folks here. And if you're listening today, please do let us know in the comments about your experiences, if you have any questions, and we'll try to get through as many as we can today.
Yes, totally. We'll try to weave it in as we touch upon all of the other topics that we'll be talking about. So let's get started. We're going to start off just talking about kind of the logistics, the boring details before we get into the more kind of advanced stuff. So this, when we're thinking about logistics of feeding, I think that the big questions that we have is, you know, they're the how and the what and the when question. Mm-hmm. So first thing, how many times a day should we be feeding our dogs, and when should we be feeding our dogs?
Really, really good question. So I've just convinced my parents to stop feeding their 3-year-old Shih Tzu 3 meals a day. Our adult dogs, our dogs that are not puppies, from my understanding, do not need 3 meals a day. I see that being quite frequently done, or free feeding, you know, food is available at all times. And from my experience, that's not the luxury that we think it is. You know, we think we're offering them all of this lovely food, whereas in fact it can actually impact our relationship because we feed them too much, and maybe they develop, you know, maybe they're overweight, in discomfort, maybe we're just putting stress on their GI system. And if you have a surplus, if you have an abundance, something stops being valuable. By no means are we talking about starving our dogs. Our dogs should eat the appropriate amount for their weight and size and breed and activity level. But honestly, with an adult dog, I recommend feeding once a day, max twice a day, because additionally, we're often giving our dogs training sessions, enrichment. Ash is eating a chew right now next to me, right? So it's not like they're not eating for long periods of time. It's just that they get 1 meal a day and then additions. And I really try to move folks away from 3 big meals or even 2 big meals because especially for little dogs or older dogs that are over 3-4 years old, it's just often not necessary. And yeah, it took me about 2 years to convince my parents.
Oh my God. Well, it's still an incredible feat that it came to a conclusion. You can say that definitively.
Yeah, I'm very proud of them.
So that's, I think, a really great point. I think that I see this a lot with my clients especially because a big recommendation that we make, a big part of any behavior plan is going to be enrichment, right? And getting the dog kind of using their food in a therapeutic way, and offering them their food in a therapeutic way that meets a lot of their needs. And a lot of my clients will do their enrichment on top of the same kind of regular portion of meals that the dog was getting before we met. And so they are just getting a lot more calories. And I often see those dogs over the course of our time working together do gain a significant amount of weight, which ultimately isn't going to help they're unless they're severely underweight and they need to put on that weight, but that so rarely is the case. It's not going to help their overall behavior, and in fact can sometimes make it worse, especially if there is any added stress on parts of their body that don't and aren't used to that stress. So can you talk about, again, the kind of specifics, like how guardians should be thinking about balancing this kind of idea of giving their dogs enrichment with also considering the maintaining the physical health of their dog?
Yeah. So usually we recommend to clients that they, discuss with whoever is qualified and experienced enough to give you, information about what your dog should be eating and how much they should be eating. And then we divvy it up, essentially. We don't just kind of free feed, putting things in toys willy-nilly. We need to make sure that we are using the right amount of calories and the right type of calories as well throughout the day. I don't want folks just feeding their dogs only liver treats for days on end. It needs to be balanced. It needs to be something that you work with a professional with. And usually I would suggest, either giving them a small meal in the evening is my personal preference, but again, every dog is different. A smaller meal in the evening, that can be in a bowl if you want to, or it can be in games or, whatever your dog really enjoys. And then the rest goes, think about a pie chart, a small amount that's going to go to dinner, and the rest of it is going to go throughout the day in toys, as part of this chew that Ash is eating, so he doesn't bother me while I'm chatting with you. Whatever you need to allocate that. Just like you allocate energy, you can add to different activities. You can allocate the food resources to different activities. So I know for Ash, for example, that he needs a decent amount of just like destruction. So like at least a quarter of his food a day goes into cardboard boxes and toys that he can rip up. He needs that. Right, that's necessary. Yeah. A bit of his meal today has gone into just keeping him still and quiet while we chat, right? So whatever you need, you allocate those resources, but it does have to be like a mindful and conscious thing. And we also need to be thinking about what we're giving them, because again, not nutritionists, but there are different types of food that you can be giving your dogs. You can give them sort of low calorie, dense, filler dense foods like bad quality or lower quality kibbles, which, that might not be where you want to be putting your valuable resources. You might want to be like really pulling out the big guns and getting really tasty, high quality, fresh food, freeze dried foods that are nutritionally complete. But I do always challenge guardians to be thinking about what are you feeding your dogs? Is it and what form is it taking? And what are you putting that food in, essentially? Is it cardboard boxes? Is it a bowl? Is it a chew? How does that work? And think about the whole day, the whole week of your dog, even, and where that food is going. I know for Hira, I need to keep a certain amount of food for just management of noises, right? And that comes out of his kitty, of his daily food. So yeah, definitely be thinking about all those different things for your dog, and speaking to someone who's really professional and has good experience and certifications in this area can be especially helpful for dogs that have like sensitivities and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that. Like kind of multi-step process you just gave. So the first thing is we really just want to be investigating, right, what and how much do our dogs need, and then we want to be thinking about like what are the areas where we know that they're going to need help using food, and can we preemptively, right, kind of parse out the food into those different kind of enrichment toys, or can we have it on hand at a certain moment where they're going to need help with noises? And that is, like you said, it's going to take some planning. And if you have a dog, like for instance, I have some clients with dogs that their dogs right now, they don't actually have a lot of coping skills to be able to self-settle or soothe during the day, and the guardians work from home, and so they need to kind of be providing their dogs a lot of kind of like what people would say a constant stream of reinforcement. Those are the dogs where we really want to be considering the kind of lower, we want to have a lot of really maybe low cal things prepped, so that guardian doesn't have to be worrying about, okay, now I have to give my dog a lot of stuff to work on and I'm worried about weight gain. It could just be like chicken broth frozen, right? And literally, what is the caloric intake on that? It's marginal, especially if you consider what the dog might need to do to get that ice cube out, right? Moving its body around and all of that. They're expending maybe just as many calories as they're ingesting. So yeah, I think that that takes a lot of planning and kind of knowing, right, your stuff beforehand to be able to say that's what I need to do.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely
Okay,
things
let's
that I'm
see.
thinking. For Ash, I use frozen peas a lot. Like if I want him to just like, I want to just throw food at him in the pan while I'm training with Hera, I'll just swap out like frozen peas, ice cubes. I've trained him for ice cubes before, you know, so we can get creative for
Yeah.
some of our dogs if we're lucky. If we're lucky enough to have hungry staffies like Ash, but not everyone is that lucky.
Not everyone, well, especially the people who are here. I think there was a question in there, Karishma. I don't know if you can see it. I can't.
I did see it, and it was all about building food drive, and we'll talk about that likely as we go down. But I can watch those the questions and bring them back up when necessary, Nicole, because I know you don't have access to that on your side of the screen.
Okay, amazing, perfect, and that's kind of our cue to move forward. So what I want to talk about next is kind of an experience that I imagine maybe our clients have struggled with or many of our clients have struggled with at some point with their dogs. And this is about the phenomena of kind of like food being poisoned, or food kind of becoming, less valuable, or just something that is avoided or not interacted with in the way that we as trainers and as guardians would prefer. So can you talk to us? I know that you have a lot of experience. This is a topic near and dear to your heart with poisoning food. And can you start off just talking about like what that is, that term poisoned food?
Yeah, this is a great question. So loads of people who have acutely fearful dogs come to us saying, my dog doesn't like food. It won't eat food in stressful environment. It won't eat food full stop in the home. And this really rings true to me because I made all the mistakes that are possible to make in the first sort of 3 years of my career, with my really quite challenging first dog, who had extreme fear of lots and lots and lots of different things. And when we say poisoning, what we mean is that a dog is reinforced by food. Every living creature that eats food and uses food to sustain its life is reinforced by food. However, dogs can learn that food is unsafe through associations with unpleasant experiences. And so frequently when we have very sensitive dogs in highly triggering environments, we can accidentally teach them that food is unsafe, especially food coming from us is unsafe, or food in situations where they're uncomfortable is unsafe. And I did this with Hera before we had our big kind of renaissance of our relationship, and I changed everything. We got to a point where I would bring out food in my treat pouch and he would run into the other room and hide from me. And I was like, this does not seem right. Clearly I'm doing something wrong here. And it took a long time for me to kind of figure out what it was that I've done. And we've kind of got a few ideas here of common things that we see folks doing that might accidentally be devaluing food even further for your dogs and contributing to their lack of food motivation. So we want to make sure we're not doing any of these things. And I think we're going to, hopefully that explains the poisoning of food. And let us know, anyone, if you've experienced this from your dogs, like you hand them food and they're like, no, I don't want it, or something like that. So common, I think.
So common. And sometimes I see it with specific foods as well. If a guardian has a history of using food like what they wanted, it's always done, I want to say, with the best intentions, right? Because of this, right? And that's the saddest part is it's so confusing almost when it happens, because you're like, wait, but this should be working. And it's just not working the way we want it to. It's working kind of against us. So I see it like, for instance, we can talk about some of the ways that we can devalue food. Actually, I'll give the example when we talk about the specifics, because I want to talk about that. So can you talk about a couple of ways in which we as handlers may actually inadvertently be devaluing food reinforcers with our dogs?
Yeah, so I touched upon this earlier in the section about when we should feed and how much we should feed. But one of the biggest things that I think is quite common now, lots of folks know about this, is just that making food freely available, that surplus in and of itself, is going to be problematic. So we call that free feeding. This was one of the things my parents were doing. Sorry, I'm really just like dragging them through shit today.
Right.
But this is a perfect example. My family are Indian Irish. We're feeders, like whenever there's a problem, we just throw food at the situation. And that's an example of a not healthy or a helpful attitude, especially with dogs that are sensitive. So making that food available, having large bowls of food out all the time that the dog can just go and get, especially if the dog is likely to overeat, is not going to be helpful. We want to have those specific set meal times. So that's just the number one kind of thing that I would suggest here. I think the second thing is when we offer food. And this is a really important one that I really messed up on. And we're told so frequently over and over again that we should pair uncomfortable things with food. Mm-hmm. When the dog is scared, offer them food. They see the trigger, give them food. If they're mm-hmm. nervous, feed them through the situation. And as I've become more refined in my use of reinforcement-based training, this is something I've really moved away from. We do not mm-hmm. want to offer our dogs food over and over again when they're feeling funky. That's mm-hmm. not going to build the right associations. If they feel funky and then food appears, and then they feel funky and then food appears, who knows in which direction that learning is occurring? Are they learning that scary things equal food? Or, like I did with Hira, are they learning that food equals scary things, right? And this comes from me being, as many humans are, pushy and maybe not so observant, right? So a big mm-hmm. part of my issue with food with Hira, just to give you an example, was around grooming and husbandry. As anyone who yes. listened to me for 5 seconds bang on about Hira, he's a poodle. And he came to me at 4.5 months, seemingly never having been groomed at the breeders. And I then really slacked, I'm not going to lie, because he was so fearful of everything. I kind of was like, this is not a priority. And so I would feed him to perform those uncomfortable procedures. And I would essentially shovel food in his face while doing things that he was extremely uncomfortable about. And within a few months of doing this, I would pull out my food bag and he would just leg it. He'd be like, hell no, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And he stopped taking food from my hand and he stopped eating in the same room as me. Now, here is a bit of an extremer case. He has like a diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder, which makes it more likely for this kind of negative association to generalize. However, that's a lot of our dogs, right?
Yeah,
that's a lot of our dogs. So we need to be careful that we do not offer food when over threshold. And it's something that we also, like both of us, I know, counsel our clients in, if your dog is reacting, maybe don't offer them food in that moment. Maybe that's not the best thing to do, not because we don't want to reinforce the reaction. I don't give a shit about reinforcing the reaction, because I don't want to devalue the food. I don't want the food to become something that happens in this uncomfortable emotional place for the dog, because they can very quickly learn. So I want us to be really careful about when we're offering our dogs food. We want to set them up for success eating. Offer them food when they are likely to enjoy that food, and use other management strategies in moments when you can't. And it's too much to go into here, like what you should use, but in general, just get them to slip out of there, whatever situation they're in. Don't try and feed them through the situation, just move away from the situation, right? I wish that I had just, unfortunately it was the case, I would have just muzzled Hira and done the groom. I should have just done that instead of trying to negotiate with him and pressure him into eating through the interactions. And it's something that we see so frequently. A kind of tangent, and then we can pause for a second, is using food to bring dogs closer to things they're scared of. It's kind of another version of this, right? I did this with Hira all the time as well. I would go, come on, you can do it. Let's go past the scary construction. Have a treat, have a treat, have a treat. And he learned that food was a way of manipulating him into situations that he wasn't comfortable with. And of course he did, because it was exactly what I was doing. I didn't realize it. I was like, I'm positively reinforcing him. But I don't get to choose whether it's reinforcing for him, right? He chooses that, and it was not reinforcing for him. So we never recommend using food to get dogs closer to things that they're uncomfortable with. At the minimum, just use it to get them away if you need to use it. But really be careful, especially with those dogs that are touch and go with their eating. We definitely don't want to be using that too much. Did you agree with that?
Yeah, you brought up so many good points. And I think that I think that the thing that maybe we haven't maybe talked about is like the fact that it can be so challenging for people to tell, I guess, when their dog is too uncomfortable, is over threshold, because for a lot of people, eating means that their dog, to them, I think it means that their dog is under threshold. And this, as a trainer, as a young trainer coming up, this is also what I believed. And I think you too, right? If this is what you were doing, is that like, if the dog is eating, they are under threshold and they are okay. They're in a good spot emotionally. Because if they're eating, you know, you're only eating if you're calm, right? But very quickly, I think I learned a lot just like through hands-on practice with the dog and a lot of observation, is for a lot of dogs that's not the case, and they will eat when they are over threshold. And can you touch a little bit more on how we can then, if we can't use eating as a barometer, what can we use as a barometer to see if our dogs are actually comfortable with the situations that they're in?
Such a good question. And I always think about, like, I've definitely had like a bad breakup and been like crying into a tub of ice cream, and I was like eating, but I was not feeling good. Like, and Ash is the same. Ash will eat through a volcano eruption. Like, he really will. He could be having a full-blown panic attack and he'll eat. Gemma, one of the CCA staffers, her dog will eat while crying. Literally.
Like whining, right?
Like that. Like, that's not a reinforcing experience for anyone. So I use a few different things here. I mean, number one is body language, and we can't tell you when their ears are forward, they're fine. Every dog is different, right? Like, I can look fine on the outside, but I can be having a nervous breakdown on the inside, and many dogs are really similar. You have to know for your individual dog. Mm-hmm. So some examples that I have just off the top of my head: is your dog responsive to a cue that it would be responsive to? I have a cue for Ash, it's ready. And when I say ready, he looks at me. And if he doesn't look at me, I'm not going to give him food. He's not ready. And that's why I named that cue ready, because it's a helpful reminder to me. Are you ready? And he's like, hell no, there's something over there. And I'm like, all right, no worries, that's fine.
Yeah.
Another dog in my household, Emily, is a dog that has lots of GI issues. And she has a history of quite pressured eating with her handler. We came up with this great barometer, which is if Emily will seek out the food from the floor, it is reinforcing for her. If we have to place it in her mouth for her to dutifully swallow, it is not reinforcing for her. So you have to come up with a barometer that is dog specific. Is it that will they eat a low value food? Will they eat this kibble? Or is it, you know, will they respond to this cue? Is it their body language? Is it, are they panting? There are so many different versions of this behavior. But I definitely think that thinking about those individual barometers and in general just how responsive they are is usually a pretty good one to go for. If they can't respond to a basic cue that they can do at home, chances are they're not feeling really, really good. We touched a little bit upon, you know, this idea that some dogs, you can ask them a question and Ash can say no to me. I can say, are you ready, Ash? And he'll say no by not looking at me. I think a big thing we have to do is respect that no. As an Irish Indian, you know, I'll be like, are you hungry? Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain? Are you sure you don't want this? So open, come on, just try a little, smell it. It's really good, I swear. We need to take that no first time, right? If I say to Ash, are you ready? And he's like, there's something over there. If I then start forcing that food on him, that's just adding more pressure to the situation. Yeah. So we need to accept a no the first time. What's he doing? Totally. We need to accept a no. Oi, what are you doing? Quit that.
Ash will not accept the no the first time.
Ash will not accept the no, no. And the same with Emily, right? The dog who needs to take the food from the floor. If she doesn't take the food from the floor, we just believe her the first time. And that's what I can tell everyone, is to believe your dog when they say no, because they're not lying. They really mean it. Look, they really do mean it. And there is one last thing, which is about how we offer that food. Because this would be a good time to go into this. I was going to do some demos because I find this is a... Sorry, he's finished his shoe and he's going nuts. So it's 7 p.m. here, so it's like the perfect time for him to go nuts. So
we have about, I think we could do like about maybe 5 minutes for that, and then shorten the next section just a bit, and then we'll be good on time.
Perfect, let's do that. So last thing that I'm going to talk about here about poisoning food is food delivery. How are you giving the food to that dog? And if you're anything like me, you do this. Hello. Like that with the kibble. And for many dogs, I see a kind of response, like they might take the food, but that hand right in their face, literally like a pill, putting it in their mouth and down their throat. One, you're not getting that barometer reading of how much they want that food because you're literally placing it into their stomach. But secondly, it can also be quite intimidating for lots of dogs to have people in their face. We're not feeding an infant, human infant, we're feeding a dog. So I wanted to show my three favorite ways to deliver food. Well, four favorite ways, let's say four favorite ways. Really, really simple, really easy. And I'd love for folks to try this with their dogs and see if it's easier than giving them food like a baby bird. So let's just do a quick demo of what we shouldn't be doing. Ready, Ash? You're going to show them? We don't want to be, you want a cookie, leaning over them and putting it in their mouth like that. That is probably not going to be contingent with building comfort around eating. The first
or
way
excitement.
is I'm going to, oops, sorry.
Or excitement. We want to build excitement.
Or excitement.
As well.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So here's the first way. You feed them like a horse. It's pretty simple. You just cup the food in your hand and you lower it in between your knees. And you allow the dog to come into your space and get that food, or you hold it out a little bit to the side, not like this, because most dogs won't enjoy that. Maybe to the side like this, but it's the same way every time. Your hand is cupped like a little, you're feeding a horse or a goat. That's really number one way that we want to do it. Number two will be to make the food just, obviously just putting it on the floor. There you go, done. Easiest, laziest way, that's number two. But my favorite ways are for dogs that maybe you want to build some excitement around that food. And method number one will be to make that food dance a little bit and let them chase it and hunt it down themselves and get them running around getting that food. Oh, did it go behind the couch? Get them running and chasing that food, because many of our dogs are quite predatory, and it can be really helpful to harness that. Someone actually mentioned in the questions, my dog won't take food when we're outside from my hands. I have to throw it at them. Well, that's an example of exactly this. That's a more reinforcing delivery system for that dog. So you can be choosing how you deliver treats to kind of make them feel better about that food. The last one is a catch. This is my favorite one. You look really cool. People are like, nice. When they see you do this with your dog, you feel very in sync. And I usually put like a little cue, like catch or get it or something like that to this behavior. So that would look like this. Ready? Catch. And you can rehearse this with your dog. Catch. And practice getting them really good at catching that food out of the air. And this is really fun for lots of dogs, much more fun than just getting that food handed to them. They have to work for it, and they get to kind of chomp down on that in a really nice way. Let me just throw a bunch of food into the yard for this guy. Get it. Good job. Ugh, I got gross treat hands now.
That was awesome. That was such a good, visual kind of demo of how we can increase just like a dog's desire to eat. Truly, it was perfect. And yeah, I think that really feeds really nicely into our next section, which is all about building food drive. So, right, that's one of the ways that we can do that is by changing the way that we deliver a treat to maximize the kinds of exciting, activities that our dogs are doing while eating. So like Ash was chasing, right? Or catching, right? That associating those pleasurable activities that Ash enjoys inherently with eating is going to help him feel that same feeling when food comes out and you're not doing those activities, right? So that's just our classical conditioning, which is really, really cool. And there are a couple of other ways that we can build drive. So let's talk about those things. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about let's say logistically, how can we build drive? What's just the simplest way we can build, food drive for most dogs?
Yeah. So, step number one is thinking again about how much we're feeding and what we're feeding and kind of the environments that we're in. So for Hira at the beginning, when I really messed up and I taught him that food was unsafe and I lied to him, over and over again, saying it's fine, eat this. And then it really wasn't fine for him. I really couldn't come in with the kibble, the high quality kibble that I was using with Ash there. Hira would have laughed at me and left the room immediately. When I was first working with Hira building his food drive, I fed him very little. Once a day, I tried to involve food into our relationship. Once a day, 30 seconds, and I used McDonald's hamburgers. I used pork chops. I used steak. You can, be as healthy as you can to be successful. But arguably, if you have a dog that's not eating from your hands in any circumstance and has major behavioral issues, it's okay to, sometimes when you have really big bad feelings, you buy ice cream, and that's okay, right? So maybe we need to pull out the big guns with our dogs. A client that we were working with has a dog that has recently started taking medication that inhibits its appetite. And he wasn't happy eating even expensive, nice, high quality treats in the urban environment. And I got them going out with steaks and pork chops, and it was night and day. Suddenly when they said ready, he'd be like, hell yeah, I'm ready. Right? Because the motivator was sufficiently powerful. So I want us to think, how frequently are we offering them food? At the beginning, maybe it's just once or twice a day. Right? And maybe we're offering them the best food. Obviously, they're getting meals. We're not starving them. But in terms of interacting with us and training for food, especially in an environment like a stressful urban environment, maybe we just offer them food once or twice, make it rare, make it really, really good, and build their interest in us and in working for that food, because that food becomes much more valuable. I just see it overused so frequently. Overused, paying people a lot, like lots of small, it's like giving someone lots of $1 bills. They're like, meh, I don't want your $1 bills. If you give them $100 once a day, they'll be like, can I have that $100, please? Do you want me to do something, for that? So really think about what you're feeding them and how much you're feeding them. I think those are two things. And then additionally, the how you're feeding them, right? That we just discussed. How are you offering them that food? Are you shoving it in their face, or are you making it much more desirable and enjoyable for them to access?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think you were going to talk about what. Oh my God, Ash, he was really weighing up whether or not he should go for that dog again. It's so cute.
He knows he shouldn't, but he really wants to.
It kind of looks like him from the distance. But so the last thing I think we're going to talk about is how we could use activities that the dog enjoys. So this is an extension of kind of like the getting them to like food by associating it with chasing or with catching, right? How can we use other activities that our dogs enjoy to help build this interest in eating?
Yes, this is like the real key kind of part, I think, of this. If anyone takes anything away from this, that should be this, which is that eating is a behavior, just like sitting or recall. It's a behavior. We can train a dog to eat more readily and to find that enjoyable through associating eating with the things that they like best. So lots of folks say to me, I can't train with food because my dog just wants to chase birds, or my dog just wants to explore this pond. And someone's actually mentioned that in the questions here. They said my dog is very environmentally and movement motivated. When I try to offer treats for check-ins, he'll often spit them out. So that's food refusal. That's him saying no, right? So we got to respect that no. He's not over threshold in the traditional sense. He would just rather sniff. And I think this really reminds me of your dog, Nicole.
Yes,
This really reminds me of Spooky. And I've got another question here from someone with a Shiba. How do we motivate self-serving breeds? And I would rephrase that as, how do we motivate a dog that's motivated by other things in the environment, not us, right? Prey animals, chasing, running, climbing. Ash loves to climb so much. So what we're going to do in these cases is use a behavioral law called the Premack principle. So we're going to get nerdy for just like 2 seconds. And the Premack principle basically means that you can use things that are very likely to reinforce things that are very unlikely. So this Shiba, who is, maybe much more interested in climbing on the back of the couch and looking out of the window, or sniffing that dog pee in the corner, that Shiba would much rather explore and sniff than take food from your hands, right? So what we can do is we can use their preferred activity to reinforce the eating. I do this all the time with Hera. I ask him to eat a cookie, and then I do his absolute favorite thing, which is throw a ball for him to chase. And through association and classical conditioning, we are teaching the eating behavior and reinforcing it with behaviors that the dog finds extremely reinforcing. So here's an example. Nicole, you're walking with Spooky the Spaniel, and for anyone who doesn't know Spooky, Spooky is a working line Spaniel from Yorkshire. So he is cuckoo and absolutely obsessed with sniffing and nature and running in nature and exploring in nature, right? So you get to a field with Spooky and he is not interested in eating because he wants to go and explore absolutely everything in the environment. We could stand there with him for a few minutes, maybe bring out after a few minutes the steak, you know, one big piece of steak. And maybe you're gonna and toss it for Spooky. If he catches and eats that steak, you go, good boy, go explore, and you take his leash off and he goes to go and explore that environment. You will be teaching him that when he eats food, he gets a massive good feeling, and it will be much more likely for him to eat that food in the future. You see how different that is from pairing it with scary and uncomfortable things. We're literally doing the opposite. We're flipping it on its head. And whatever your dog enjoys, you can be doing this, right? So the delivery systems that we discussed, the tossing of the food, the chasing. Another one that I do with Hira is hiding the food. I bury it in the couch cushions. And Hira is a poodle. He loves to sniff and search. And it makes it much more likely that he'll eventually eat that food at the end of that activity. Just like Ash, if he chases it, he's like down the hatch. Same with Hira. If he goes and searches for a piece of kibble, he'll much more likely eat it than if I just hand it to him. He'll do exactly what this commenter is saying. He'll just spit it out. It's a food refusal. He says no, right? And it's the same. It's like I'm a relatively antisocial person sometimes, and if my friend's like, let's go to a party, I'll be like, no. But if they're like, do you want to come hiking with me? I'm like, hell yeah, I'd like to hang out with you so that I can hike, right? It's Premack. It's pairing the thing that's unlikely, me hanging out with people, not dogs, with something that's likely, which is moving through nature, because I really enjoy walking in parks and stuff like that. So we do this all the time. We just have to apply it to the dogs and to this behavior of eating, and know that like my dog isn't food motivated is a phrase that can be changed. It's not stuck. It's not a fixed thing. I think that's really, really, really important.
Absolutely. Oh my God, that was so well said. And I think that finally this last bit, which is going to kind of, I think, because I imagine a lot of people are like, well, you know, it's so challenging. The second we step outside, you know, no matter what I have, let's just say even the highest value reinforcer, let's say and this was really the case with Spooky actually. You know, you remember I would bring him to the park and I would have McDonald's chicken nuggets, and I would have, you know, the whatever you were making here, whatever lamb's heart, literally the like organs of the beating heart of a lamb. No, it wasn't beating. That would be kind of intense. But you know, it was maybe not beating very like not too long ago. And he is the type of dog where he really found the environment so much more reinforcing than food, even if it danced, even if I, you know, threw it and tossed it around. So for dogs like that, you know, but he could do it, let's say in the home. He really could eat that food in the home, right? He could eat it out on our front porch or right on the street walking to the park. It was just in the park that it was so challenging for him. You know, for those dogs, like, what are we, like, how can we help them generalize to these new environments where, you know, they really struggle to engage?
Yeah. This is a really good question. And I think a big part of this is going to be to do with thinking about your individual dog and then sort of ranking the environments that they find uncomfortable and comfortable. Where are they safe? Where are they relaxed? Where are their nervous systems in the most healthy state of balance? If we rank those, and then we also rank their reinforcers, right, we can start to kind of move slowly along the spectrum. I think the mistake that we both made with Spooky at the beginning was that we were like, he's a spaniel, we'll take him to the park, it'll be great. Yeah. Whereas in fact, that large open field with birds, people, dogs, kids was one of the most challenging environments we could have put him in. For Hira, the park was actually one of the easiest environments. The more challenging environment for him is the urban environment or the veterinary office, right? So we really have to rank for the individual dog what's going to be challenging for them. And then it is about slow exposure, systematic exposure, and get conscious exposure. I don't want you guys just like whacking some treats in your pocket and going to Times Square. You need to think about this really, really strategically. For our clients who struggle with like multiple phobias, anxiety conditions, who are in central Manhattan, which is like 80% of our clients, right? Like clients that when I tell other dog trainers about that, they're like, that's impossible. I'm like, well, it might not be impossible, but it does take finesse. And an example training plan that we've used for many of our clients involves moving to the street from an apartment building over months, right? Literally months. So you start off in the apartment, then you walk into the hallway, then you're in the stairwell, then you're one floor down, then you're one floor up, then you're in the lobby. We're not just walking straight into the middle of the street and offering them a cookie and going, why are you eating this? Because to them, so much has happened in between those two spaces. And we really need to be mindful. So for Hero, when I was first asking him to eat, it wasn't eat outside. It wasn't even outside. It was when we first came back in or just before we left. So we really need to think really intelligently about how we can like hijack this situation. How can we get our foot in the door? Where is the approximation towards the end goal? And for many of our dogs, the first few months of a program is building their ability to work for reinforcers in environments where they're going to need to do their learning. And that can be step one for many of our dogs. And I think that is missed so frequently. Like, you got
it. He got it.
He can have it.
Wait, this is, it's such a good point. And I see actually that a lot of like clients who are really struggling ultimately in their behavior plans are struggling mostly for this reason. They didn't actually build up the reinforcers to be as high value and as fluent as they needed to be in the environment in which they're working. So, you know, you can't train a dog outside, right, if they can't eat outside or they don't find eating outside fun and actually valuable. And it's the same for any reinforcer, play, right? But, you know, here we're talking about food, and it really, you know, it does sound like a long time to be working up to, you know, spending a couple months getting them eating in a hallway or even the front of the building. But remember, this is a skill that they're going to have for life. How long is your dog's life? How long are you going to need to be using, you know, food to some degree or some kind of reinforcer? Let's not even think about food, just some kind of reinforcement to maintain and to teach them new behaviors. A long time, right? They're going to be changing and encountering new things all the time. Especially if you live in a place like New York, if you decide to change anything about your life, you know, at any point with your dog, you're going to need reinforcers available to you. And so I think that it's actually spending that amount of time, and we're talking about the fearful, like, you know, not food driven dog or the hyper aroused or excited one. So it's not every single dog. Most dogs can move through this plan in a relatively, you know, shorter period of time. But for those dogs, I think it's absolutely worth it to spend a little bit of extra care and time building that reinforcement system, because that's gonna pay dividends basically throughout your life with your dog. And so don't think of it as like a failure, I'd say, to clients, that you have to spend that time, you know, building it. I think that the more reps, successful repetitions you get in with your dog where they are excited and happy and interested to be eating, the higher your chances of them actually being able to eat and to find that food reinforcing in stressful environments. Mm-hmm. So I think that, I think of it like exercise. You know, it truly is like exercise.
I totally agree. And I think maybe I should rephrase as well some of my statements in that, insofar as that, you know, teaching them to eat outside is not separate from the training or the teaching that you want to do to your animal to change whatever behavior problem they have. It is the same thing. Mm-hmm. When Hero started eating outside, it was because he felt safe outside, and he felt safe outside because he was eating outside, and it was like a circular kind of situation. So if we spend time getting them comfortable, not just eating, playing as well, getting even pets is something. 1 second. That's it. Let's go. Quick. Here, up here. Thank you. Sorry, it's like almost past, and my Ash the Smash is deciding to cause trouble, aren't you? It's part of the behavior, because we're teaching them to feel safe. We're teaching their nervous system to be in a place where it is receptive to reinforcement. They're not in a state of fight, flight, freeze. They're not panicking. Yes. They are able to eat. They're able to breathe. They're able to think. That is 90% of the training in many cases. And once we get there, everything else often falls into place quite wonderfully, from my experience. So even if it does take a really long amount of time to get them to the point where they're eating outside, you've won half the battle once you're there, because those dogs were not eating because they were so uncomfortable, and you've just given them a really valuable lesson by teaching them that it is safe to eat. And once they can eat, we move on to the next reinforcement, which is play. And when they'll play, we move on to the next reinforcer, which is physical affection, right? I've got to the point with Hira now where I'm using T-touch, massage and body work as a reinforcer in situations where he previously wouldn't eat. And now he's coming to me away from triggers and going, hey, touch me. And that's fantastic. That is therapy right there. Thea and me says, this is such good information. This is information that I wish I had 5 years ago.
Me too, honestly. And I know we're going to do lots more talks about the other kinds of reinforcement too. So, we mentioned a couple. We talked about play. We talked about social interactions with our dogs as being reinforcing. And I think that for both of us, we're definitely interested to delve into these topics in the future. If you all are interested in hearing a little bit more about those things and found this useful, just on time, we definitely are kind of nearing the end, or else we'll lose the chat. So are there any questions that we should answer before it's over? Any last thoughts that you...
Let me just dive back and make sure that we've covered everything. So Cassie would rather sniff something than get food, really so similar to our dogs. So that goes back to this idea of the Premack principle. Maybe you can get Cassie eating a cookie and then say, oh, good girl, go sniff, and point her to that grass and take her there and show it to her and say, wow, look at this. And she's like, oh, wow, that's amazing, right? You can leverage that similarly to how I will feed Hira and then throw the ball. Jess here has mentioned shredding their way to food as another way of building those good associations with food. Totally a great example. Ash is obsessed with shredding, and he eats with 10 times more gusto when he does that. Yeah, perfect. I think you pretty much got all the questions though that we've asked, kind of got here. Yeah, walkies and wellness. I see a lot of reactive or nervous dogs be incredibly suspicious of food on the floor because of the misuse of Find It. Yeah, 100%. And that's an example of the specific food delivery system being poisoned, right? Like many dogs, the hand feeding is poisoned in this case. People are trying to apply reinforcement-based kind of ideas, and it's just slightly off, and it's having the opposite effect. And this is an important topic, just to finish up. We mentioned it a few times, but this is particularly important, I think, because the misuse of food reinforcements, I think, is a big reason why folks don't believe in reinforcement-based training. And when I see folks who are struggling with reinforcement-based training, they are often missing this piece of the puzzle. It's this piece of the puzzle and then management, which is our last live, right? So we're really hitting the big numbers here. But if we're not being smart about the way we're using reinforcement, it can go really wrong. So I think this is a really useful chat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think that's everything I had to say. I don't see any more questions here. A few folks saying that it's helpful. Thank you so much. But this has been so great. So me and Nicole are going to be on every month to talk about different things. And so if anyone has any suggestions of things that you'd like us to discuss next month, put it in the comments. For example, I've got another question here, because we don't have time really quickly. We have 2 minutes to answer it. No, we don't. Sorry. We'll answer it in the comment section. It was so nice to see you all and to get your fantastic questions. Nicole, as always, you're a legend, and we're very lucky to have you on the team. And I'm so excited for next month so we can chat. You're going to have to get yourself a fun drink with me next time.
I know. Well, it's 2 o'clock.
Oh yeah, okay, it's 8 p.m. where I am, so it's a little less weird. And then don't you have sessions after this, actually? Okay, maybe not.
and I'm a lightweight, but you know, I'll maybe make myself something a little more fun than water. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're gonna head off. I'm gonna save this so everyone can watch it back, and let us know if you have any questions in the comment section, and we'll see you all soon. Okay, bye. Bye, Nicole.
Bye.